Good morning, Rabbi Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Berachot, and we are on Daf Lamed Zayin, Amud Aleph, the learning of Amud Yomi for Chodesh Heshvan. It's been sponsored by Shahab and Shena Rabbi, the health and prosperity of their family, the Hatzlacha and growth in Torah. And also has been sponsored by Hami family, Leilu Nishmat Yosef ben Al-Gasimha Bat Rahel, and Aliza Tadesara Bat Hanoch Feivel, that their neshamot should have an aliyah. Amen. The entire learning of KBT for this week has been sponsored by Dr. Omid and Kelly Shayeh for the prosperity and hatzlacha of their entire family and their growth and hatzlacha in Torah as well. Amen. So we have been discussing the brachot of rice versus grains. That we saw the very interesting shita of Rabbi Yohanan ben Nuri yesterday, who holds that rice, orez, generally speaking, we translate orez as rice, is also considered a min hita, a min dagan, a type of grain, and therefore you could make matzah with it on Pesach. If you eat the bread of rice, you're chayav karet on Pesach. It's mamash like one of the grains, right? And we mentioned that we don't paskin like that. We had the shita of Rav Shmuel, the bottom of Lamed Vav Amud Bet, who hold that if you have any of chameshet haminim, of 5 grains, which is wheat and barley and spelt and oat and rye, in a mixture, we gave you examples of many of the things that we have in the Star Richolim that we say mezonot on it, even though it has many other ingredients. We mentioned the Tosafot that says that's only when it's as an active ingredient, not something that you have there for just ledabek, to put the ingredients together. We gave the example of Captain Crunch cereals that they have some grain in it, but it's only ledabek. Then you don't have the bracha of mezonot. It's just a shakol on it, and so on. Now we ended up saying that the 2 Rav Shmuels, one was anything called sheyesh bo mechameshet minei dagan, anything that has in it chameshet minei dagan mevarech ala borei minei mezonot. The other Rav Shmuel was kol shehu mechameshet minei dagan, anything that's chameshet minei dagan, only you say mezonot. And we said that is coming to say that on rice you say what? Shahakol. So we destroyed that second Rav Shmuel. We said tiyufta the Rav Shmuel tiyufta, because we had a braita saying that on rice you say mezonot and not shahakol. And that's how kind of we left it. That's what the end of yesterday's shiur, right? But the problem is that same braita said that on rice, in the beginning you say mezonot, at the end you say no, ala mehya. You say me'en shalosh. So ribono shel olam, what do you do with that? Now, before we go on, and we're going to deal with that right now, today, to see why is it that we don't say me'en shalosh, we don't say ala mehya on rice, even though that we do say borei minei mezonot. The Rashba writes that even though that the Gemara said is tiyufta, the Rav Shmuel, tiyufta, that we ended up with a bomb kasha on Rav and Shmuel, says the Rashba, that's only for the second Rav Shmuel, that we don't say mezonot on rice. But the first Rav Shmuel, we never left. We never dropped the first shita of Rav Shmuel, that anything that has grain in it, we say borei minei mezonot. And therefore, Rashba says the halacha should be still cholent. You have barley and chameshet minim mezonot. He brings a Rav Haigaon that says, no, we dropped both of Rav Shmuel's. As we go through the Gemara today, we'll see that Rava perhaps paskins like the first Rav Shmuel, which is the reason that we still hold it la halacha. Okay, so that's the preview, the review of yesterday and preview of today. With that said, let's go to today's Amud. Says the Gemara. This is 4 lines up, basically. 4 lines down, sorry, the 5 lines down from where the lines widen. See, Tiyufta, that's the first word of the line. Amar Mor. If you take grains of wheat and you chew on them, you eat them, you make borei pri adama. Says the Gemara, didn't we read in the Braita borei minei zeraim that you should make a specific bracha borei minei zeraim, right? The one who creates different types of zeraim. The Gemara says, look, Asher, that's not a problem. We know who that is, guys. Who's that? Rabbi Yehuda. In our Mishnah, we learned that Rabbi Yehuda holds, you say specific brachot, always, right? So on Minei Ha'adama, instead of saying Borei Pri Adama, the Mishnah said Rabbi Yehuda holds, you say Borei Minei Deshaim. Now, Deshaim is vegetables and so on, but grains are Zeraim. So the same Rabbi Yehuda would say on salad, he would say Borei Minei Deshaim. On grains, he would say Borei Minei Zeraim. So we know that's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, V'Harabanan. Ditnan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Val Yirakot, Omer Borei Pri Adama. Rabbanan hold on vegetables, you say Borei Pri Adama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Borei Minei Deshaim. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you say Borei Minei Deshaim. Amar Mor, Hakoses et haores. If you take rice and you're eating rice, Mevarech alav Borei Pri Adama. You say Adama. Tehano afa'u b'shelo. If you ground it up, now you have rice meal, and then you made bread out of it, afa'u, and then you took that bread and you used it in a dish. You cooked it in a dish. Now you have pieces of baked rice bread in your dish. So what bracha do you make on it? Says the Gemara. Even though that you still see the pieces of bread in your dish, but in the beginning you say mezonot, not shakol, but mezonot. At the end you say bracha achad men shalosh. You say men shalosh ala mechya. This is the braita that we brought last thing yesterday, right? Through which we said is tiyufta d'Rav Shmuel. This is what it is, because it can't be Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Remember, this cannot be Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because had it been Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, what would be the bracha rishona? What would be the first bracha? Would be hamotzi, right? Remember, you made rice meal, you baked bread from it. If you would ask Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, what's the bracha rishona? What's the bracha to say in the beginning? What would he say? Rice is like grain. Anybody with me? Anyone?
There's a lot of
Right? No, it's easy. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is the one that equates rice and grain, right? So if you make rice meal and you make bread with it, what bracha do you make? Easy, right? Now you put it in a dish. Still hamotzi if you could see the bread. So here it says mezonot. It's not Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, right? This is the braita that destroyed Rav Shmuel yesterday. Last thing we went through it a little fast. The end of yesterday because we were out of time. So that's why I'm spending some time on it. So this is not Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and still it says, what's the bracha at the end when you eat the bread? Not Birkat Hamazon, not nefashot ala mechya. You say on rice, Ribono shel olam, right? You say men shalosh ala mechya on rice bread. So we got things to work on, because we don't say that. We say men nefashot, right? So that's what the Gemara is going to do. It says the Gemara. V'hatanya, didn't we read in a different braita? Don't we have a braita that says lebasof velo klum? That at the end you say velo klum. Velo klum means what? Nothing. But nothing in Gemara means borei nefashot, right? That's the baseline. Baseline means nothing special, right? Nothing special. You just say the baseline bracha, which is borei nefashot. You don't make Birkat Hamazon. You don't make men shalosh. You make velo klum, which means nefashot, right? Amar Rav Sheshat, lo kasha. Rav Sheshat says no. There's no. So wait a second. So what's happening? One Braita says you have rice bread. You say ala michya at the end. The other Braita says you have rice bread. You make pura nefashot at the end. So there's two Braitas going head to head. So it says Rav Sheshet, lo kasha. It's not a question. Ha Rabban Gamliel, ha Rabbanan. It's nothing to do with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. This is another machloket we have never been introduced to of Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, and his friends. Rabban Gamliel has a very interesting shita. He holds, if you ate a date, you took a date, you ate it. What bracha do you make, Avi? Huh? Say the most crazy that you could say. Says you make Birkat HaMazon on it. You take a pomegranate, you have a pomegranate, you make Birkat HaMazon on it afterwards, right? You have some olives, Birkat HaMazon. Anything of the Shivat HaMinim that you eat, you have to make Birkat HaMazon. That's Rabban Gamliel. Now we're going to have some heated story with Rabbi Akiva and Rabban Gamliel just in two lines. So Rabban Gamliel v'Rabbanan. The Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Ze Aklal. This is the general rule. Kol shehu b'Shivat HaMinim. Anything that is from the seven species that Eretz Yisrael has been praised with, which is, of course, wheat and barley are two of them. And then you have the five fruits of the dates and pomegranates and olives and figs and
what do we say?
Grapes, right? Those five plus the two of the grains of wheat and barley. Those are the seven minim, seven species. So any of that, Rabban Gamliel holds, shalosh brachot. You make a full 3 brachot of Birkat HaMazon on it. Chachamim disagree with him. They say no. Bracha achat me'en shalosh. You say one bracha that includes all of those 3 concepts in it, right? The 3 brachot of Birkat HaMazon, the 3 first brachot, aside from the last one that they instituted later on in Yavneh, the first 3, right, until Bonei Yerushalayim, is the bracha al HaMazon, al Haaretz, and Borei Yerushalayim, right? So those 3 concepts, if you pay attention, we say them in passing in Me'en Shalosh. That's why it's called Me'en Shalosh. It's like the 3 brachot, like Birkat HaMazon. By the way, as we're going to progress in the Perek, we will see something surprising that most of you perhaps do not know, and that is not only Birkat HaMazon is the Oraita, but according to many Rishonim, and we're talking about the Ritba, the Ra'ah, the Meiri, the Ramban, the Ran, the Rashba, the Bracha of Me'en Shalosh also is the Oraita, right? Which will have it will change our experience of having Sfekot, we're going to discuss this B'ezrat Hashem a little bit la'alacha, not too much deep into it, but things that are daily and we need, we'll try to get into them just a little bit. So this is a machloket that Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, holds. You ate a date, Birkat HaMazon. Rabban said, no, Me'en Shalosh. You say one bracha that has all those concepts in it. Says the Gemara, was even a maaseh. You remember Daf Kafchet, we had a whole drama between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, through which they had to drop Rabban Gamliel from being a Nasi, and they put Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah because he got into a fight basically with Rabbi Yeshua, and people said enough. Now, this is not as much drama, but a little bit, right? Rabban Gamliel with his Talmidim, with the yeshiva there together. Rabban Gamliel v'azkenim shehayu mesubin be'aliyah beYericho. They were in Yericho. Ve'heviu lifnehem kotvot. They brought dates for them. They're eating dates. Ve'achlu, they ate. Ve'natar Rabban Gamliel rashut leRabbi Akiva levarech. Rabban Gamliel said, Rabbi Akiva b'chavod, bench, right? So Rabbi Akiva didn't put. He jumped. Kafatz uberach Rabbi Akiva. He jumped and he said vad bracha. Of course, he's not dumb. He knew that when Rabban Gamliel said, please bechavod, he basically told him, Ma'im harorim chova, right? Bench. So what did he do? He said, sure, kvod harav. And he sat and he opened his sidur and he said, Me'en Shalosh, right? against what Rabban Gamliel holds. Right? So, Kafatz Berach Rabbi Akiva Berachot min Shalosh. He said, Al Ha'etz. Rabban Gamliel, of course, was denied, and so he says, Akiva, so why do you stick your nose into a machloket? You know what I hold, and you're my Talmid. What are you doing saying Al Mihya or Al Ha'etz, right? So Rabbi Akiva was Anav, was a tremendous Baal Midot. So he says, Kavod, he doesn't want to rub it into. It says, Rabbeinu, you're our rabbi, you're our Rebbe, you're our master, right? Afal pi she'ata omer ken. I understand you hold Birkat Hamazon, v'chavercha omrim ken, and your friends hold Al Ha'etz min Shalosh. It's machloket, and you're my Rebbe. But lemaaseh, you yourself taught us. Limatanu Rabbeinu, Yahid v'Rabim, halacha keRabim. When you have a Yahid versus Rabim, when you have an individual versus you go after majority. Now, there are those who say a much deeper insight in this Gemara that they hold, because when you have a Rebbe, like the Gemara says in 19th parak of Shabbat, that Mekomosh Rabbi Eliezer, they would make an Ismail, they would make a Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer, each one of them had Chidushim of Chilul Shabbat. For instance, we do Brit Milah on Shabbat, but what if you don't have a knife to do the Brit Milah? Can you make a knife on Shabbat in order to do the Brit Milah? That's called Machshirei Milah. We don't do that. We don't do Chilul Shabbat for that, right? You just postpone the Milah if you don't have anything to cut, right? There were those who held, and in their city, they did it like that. If you don't have knife, you make fire, you bring metal, you make the knife from scratch to go do Brit Milah, right? Machshirei Milah, he held Dochinet Shabbat. So in their place, the halacha was like them, like Maran Shulchan Aruch. We have Kibal Nuhoraot Maran, but in Eretz Yisrael, Ha'ovadia used to say it's a very, very difficult thing to understand. There's a stirot, there are contradictions from 3rd volume to the 10th volume of Ha'ovadia's Tshuvot on this. But Lemaaseh, he held, if you go to Eretz Yisrael, even if you're a Moroccan, this became a very big fight because Moroccans they don't not pushovers, they don't take things easily, right? He held all the Moroccans have to change all their minhagim to minhag of Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because Maran is Mara de Atra. He's the Rebbe of Eretz Yisrael. He's the rabbi of Eretz Yisrael. You have to come to his house. You have to listen to him. So here, Rabbi Akiva is a Talmid of Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel is the Rosh Yeshiva. So he held, even though that the Achid Rabbi Malachak Rabim, perhaps my Talmidim at least have to listen to him, right? Rabbi Akiva was a Talmid, basically. He was a Talmid Chaver. He was a, very advanced Talmid, but yet a Talmid. Rabbi Akiva disagreed with that. Rabbi Akiva held the concept of Yachid Rabbi Malachak Rabim even applies to the Talmidim or the sons of the same person. So remember the first machloket we had in the first Mishnah, that the Rabban Gamliel's sons came from Bet HaMishteh very late at night. It was already after Hatzot. They came and they hadn't said Shema yet. And they asked Rabban Gamliel, their Tati, their Abba. They said, Abba, we haven't said Shema. Do we say it or not? You have a machloket with Chachamim. Right? And he answered them that if it's not Alot HaShachar, Chayavin Aten Likrot. Right? So he felt that they have to listen to him, even though that he understood that Chachamim argue with. And that's perhaps what he held here too. But Rabbi Akiva said, Mechila, even in the yeshiva, if there is Yahid v'Rabim, it should be Halacha keRabim. So therefore, he very respectfully bowed out of this discussion and he said, look, I did like the Halacha because everybody else, Chachamim, disagree with you. So we don't say Birkat Hamazon and Shivat HaMinim. Gewaldig. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishemo. Rabbi Yehuda says in his name, Kol shehu mishivat haminim. Anything that's from the 7 species, velo min daganhu, but it's not grain. That means one of the 5 fruits, or it is min dagan, it is one of the grains, velo asao pat, but you didn't make pat, you didn't make bread out of it, you just made a daisa, made a hot cereal, whatever it is, a dish. Rabban Gamliel holds, you say Birkat HaMazon, Shalosh Berachot, which means Birkat HaMazon. The Chachamim say nope. Bracha Achat, you make one bracha, Me'en Shalosh, which means Ala Mehya Ol Al Ha'etz. Kol she'eino lo mishivat haminim velo min dagan, anything that is not from the 7 species, and it's not any of the 5 grains, kegon pat orez, like a bread made out of orez, out of rice, vedochan. Rabban Gamliel omer bracha achad mein shalosh. Rabban Gamliel says you make one bracha mein shalosh, which means say al mihya on rice. Chachamim omrim velo klum. Chachamim say you make borei nefashot rabot. So b'mai ukimtas, the Gemara says, wait a second. You are telling me that this braita that we had at the end of last page, that you say al hamichya on rice, who is that? That is Rabban Gamliel, because we just had in this braita that Rabban Gamliel is the one that says on bread made out of rice you make al hamichya. Bread made out of rice you make al hamichya, says Rabban Gamliel. So now we put a name, a face to this shita. We knew the opinion. The opinion is the braita last page. We just didn't know who it is. So the Gemara now suggesting, you know who that braita is? We know who it is. We know who holds that on rice bread you make ala mihya. Who is that? Rabban Gamliel. So the Gemara says, wait a second. You're suggesting that Rabban Gamliel is the shita that we mentioned in the previous page, who holds on rice bread you make ala mihya. Wait a second, says the Gemara. Look at the end part of the beginning of this braita. It says, right? We mentioned, you remember, we said, if you make this rice bread, then you make it in a dish, right? You have the rice bread. Now you use pieces of that, you put it in a dish, you're cooking it in a dish, right? What bracha do you make on that when they bring you the dish? So we learned at the end part of the resha of the braita, that if the prusot, if the pieces are still intact, you have a kazait, you see the bread, the rice bread still in the soup or whatever it is that you made in the dish. Then you make borei minei mezonot, and at the end you make what? Bracha achat mein shalosh. Correct? That's what we say. So says the Gemara, Mani, who is that? Rabban Gamliel, Hashta. If it's Rabban Gamliel, it can't be. Why can't it be Rabban Gamliel? Because according to Rabban Gamliel, that's not even a question. Rabban Gamliel holds that if you have even the 7 types, akotavot, on a date, you make what? Birkat HaMazon. And daisa, you say Birkat HaMazon. So im en haperusot kayamot mibaya. You need to tell me that if the pieces are not intact, you make the bracha. It's pashut. Even something much lower than that, Rabban Gamliel holds you make Birkat HaMazon. So it can't really be Rabban Gamliel. Ela pshita, but it's pashut that is Rabbanan, right? You with me? In other words, Rabban Gamliel, if I would ask you, the Chevra over here, right? What would Rabban Gamliel hold? You would say bracha on the prusot that are not intact. Right? What would you say bracha? There's no question, according to Rabban Gamliel, that just because it's not kazayit, it doesn't lose its bracha. He even holds that on dates you make Birkat HaMazon. On pomegranate, you make Birkat HaMazon. You need to tell me that if the Prusot are not Kayam, you make Bormeh. According to this Shita, that would be Pashut. So it's not Rabban Gamliel. Right? It's Rabbanan. And yet, Rabbanan are the ones who are saying that you make Bracha Achad Me'en Shalosh, you make Ala Mihya Ala Kalkala on rice cake. Right? Says the Gemara. If that's correct, it's a question from Rabbanan on Rabbanan. We said before, Rabbanan hold on rice you make for the nefashot only. So why is it that Rabbanan here are all of a sudden saying, according to this understanding, that on rice bread who is cooked in food, you make ala mihya? Says the Gemara, le'olam Rabbanan v'tani gabe orez ulbasof eno mevarech alav v'lo klum. So it's really Rabbanan. It is Rabbanan. V'tani gabe orez, and the real girsa in the Braita should not be the way we had it, but we're changing the girsa. It should be gabe on orez ulbasof eno mevarech alav v'lo klum. That you make mezonot on it, and at the end you make only borei nefashot. In other words, we had this Braita that seemed to say, at the end you say, Bracha Achad Me'en Shalosh. You say, Ala Michya. We went through all the shittot. We said it cannot be Rabbi Yohanan ben Nuri, because he would not make borei mezonot on it, he would make hamotzi, right? It can't be Rabban Gamliel, because it doesn't fit with the parameters of how Rabban Gamliel divides the bracha. It only could be Rabbanan, but it can't also be Rabbanan because Rabbanan hold it's for nefashot. So we have our back against the wall to the degree that we say it's not a typo, but it's a mistake in the Braita. Whereas Mishnayot, you don't really have this. You go change the Mishnah like that. Braitot, many of them, not many of them, but you find in Shas times that the Gemara has their back against the wall, they edit the way the Braita was said. Braitot, just give you an outlook of what Mishnah is, what Braita is. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is the author of Mishnayot. And regularly speaking, it's Asur to write Torah Sheba'al Peh. But in the time of Rabbi noticed that because of their existence too long in Galut, and the fact that people did not have the time up until then, every kid knew Mishnayot Ba'al Peh. Every less than bar mitzvah kid, they knew the entirety of Mishnayot. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who knew the entirety of Torah Ba'al Peh, by heart, the entire thing, right? And he saw that is diminishing, so he said, we got to do something about this. Rebbe was a billionaire, right? He was the richest man after the Roman emperor. We haven't had it together. We have the Gemaras in the beginning of Masechet Avodah Zarah that talk about details of how just unbelievably rich he was and how supported he was from the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire was his best friend, right? Antoninus. And he had the power to do it. He got everyone together and he codified everything. He wrote his Sefer. He called his Sefer Mishnah. Now the Rambam explains this in his Hakdamat Pirush Mishnayot, and he brings it out L'Maaseh because we think Mishnah is just a generic name. No, he wrote a Sefer. He called it Mishnah. Imagine if I write a Sefer, I call it something. He called his Sefer Mishnah. His Talmid Chaver was Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia was a student of Rabbi, but he was the highest level of his students. Right? He was almost like a friend, like a chavruta. He also authored a Torah Sheba'al Peh written format. He called it Braita. Understand? So that's how Mishnah and Braita came about. Mishnayot became, because it was much more well written and everyone was involved in writing it, it became the standard of Torah Sheba'al Peh. You have many parallels in Braitot with that, but Braita, because it was not accepted the same way Mishnah was accepted, you have different Braitot that did not come actually to the household of Rabbi Chia, that Rabbi Chia stamped it. So you have Braitas floating around that is not stamped by Rabbi Chia. And the Gemara says this. The Gemara sometimes says any Braita that has not been stamped by Rabbi Chia, it does not have the validity and the weight of Braita, right? If you have any questions in the Mishnah, we go after Braita. Mishnah, right? If you have any question in the Mishnah, we go after Braita to clarify it, right? Mm-hmm. If you have Mishnayot versus Braita, of course, the Mishnayot carry more weight, but a Mishnah that was Nishna, but Rabbi Chia, that also carries tremendous weight.
How many years after the Mishnah was written?
We're talking about the same generation. Rabbi Chia was a student of Rabbi, right? So this is the very beginning. It's not a tiyufta, because you know tiyufta is when you have a very powerful question from a different source. Since we don't have a different source, we have the braitas. It doesn't match who we based on all the information, and we do have all the information. We know who the players are, so to speak, right? We know that there is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, can't be. We know there's Rabbi Gamliel, can't be. There's only Rabbanan, right? So it has to be tweaked in that little piece, and that's why we make nefashot on rice. Now you have two braitas that they say on rice you make mezonot in the beginning, and you say velo klum, which means nefashot at the end, right? So let's start the next piece. Says the Gemara. Amar Rava, hi riata de chaklai. The riata is a very similar thing to what we had before, as hot cereal that they would make with three main ingredients. It would be flour, it would be honey, and it would be oil, right? So says the Gemara, it depends where you eat it, right? The rich people make it one way, the poor people make it a different way, right? It's like what you have cholent. Some places you go, cholent is 90% meat and like 5% other. And some other places you have to do borer to find any meat. Depends on the salary of the household. So that's the same thing over here. The Bnei Kfar, right? The villagers, they would have a lot more flour because that was cheap. And honey was expensive, right? So therefore, if you have the dice, this hot cereal, whatever you call it in our language, of the chaklai, of the villagers, the mafshi bekimcha, that they put a lot of flour inside, you make borei minei mezonot on it. My tama, why? Because the smida ikar, because the flour is the ikar. It's 90% flour. The Mechuza, but you go to Mechuza, which was a big city, a rich city. The lo mafshi bekimcha, they have a lot of dvash inside, right? And they have a little bit of flour. Says the Gemara, mevarech alav shakol niya bidvaro. You say shakol niya bidvaro on it. My tama, why? Because dufsha ikar. Because the dvash is the ikar. The Hadarama Rava went back and said, he was choser. He retracted. Rava says, no. Aidi borei minei mezonot. On both of them, you make borei minei mezonot. Why? Here it is, Rabotai. Remember, beginning of Shiur, we said that Rav and Shmuel are going to be resurrected by Rava, who is a later generation, and the halacha is like him. So perhaps, like the Rashba says, we never fall off. The first Rav Shmuel, here is when you see the Maaseh. Says Rav Halacha Maaseh, both of them, you make borei minei mezonot. Why? The Amar, because Rav Shmuel, the Amri Tarvayu, Rav Shmuel, they both say, Kol sheyesh bo b'chameshet aminim, anything that has chameshet aminim,